So maybe let's just go ahead and get started because we are recording already. We got everybody here. I know somebody mentioned a bedtime earlier. Was that, is that you, Liz? It's not that late. But all right, well, welcome. As Erin and I were talking about earlier, it took us just a few minutes to decide what we wanted this issue to be centered around. And of course, that's the more than human world. And in particular, we were really looking for work that decentered the human experience so that you had writers who were not only writing about plants and animals and insects and trees, but writing for them and attempting to enter into the dilemma and the sentience of their lives. And we have here just a handful of those writers, and we found just an absolute treasure trove of work. It's really pretty phenomenal. Erin, would you like to say anything before we get started?
I just want to thank you all for being here, and I know that if you know Nickole and I, you know how dear this subject is to two feral women who are often covered in leaves and out in the woods. So thanks for being part of those voices.
Yes. My best days, I'm generally covered in some kind of poo or other from the sanctuary for sure. So our first reader is Elizabeth Bradfield, whom I've known since her early days of her first book at Arctoy. And she works as a naturalist. She's absolutely phenomenal and teaches at Brandeis and lives on Cape Cod. Please welcome Liz.
Hi, everybody. Hi. It's so nice to be here, and I'm so glad I get to go first because then I can just sit back and relax and listen. So this is wonderful. I'm going to read the poems from this amazing issue, and I'm sure, like everyone else, I just want to add my thanks to Michael and Nickole and Erin for making this gathering possible in all ways, from the issue to this reading. I think these are part of the new book that I'm working on, I think, but we'll see. The first is titled Silver Hake, which is a kind of fish, commercial fish off of Cape Cod in the waters of New England. And I think that's all I need to say. Silver Hake, thrash, splash at the edge of vision, fish at the marsh edge on an ebb tide. I walked over, took a photo. In air, gold-eyed and rust-speckled. How long that moment for the fish, for me. Then I put my hands just behind the gills, breathed into right grip, and moved so water could pass over frill. I called up to ask if anyone would like to see. They shook their heads, silent, silhouetted against sky. They knew better than me, and so I let it, Silver Hake, go. I thought I'd seen it so clearly, slick, vivid muscle in my hands, bronze body and bronze sand. But home, I flipped through, pinched and zoomed, held and beheld again, which is when I saw the perfect circle pressed into flank, which had to be made by one ring of a scalloper's mesh bag. Which is why, by-caught and tossed back as the crew was steaming home, marsh sucking tide into its big lungs, shucking and tossing all but the marketable muscle, we came upon this fish who shares a blush with the scallop's shell, who swims over their beds, who wasn't intended to be caught up in all this, but was. And it's funny, I think, I try and see clearly the more than human world, but I'm also really interested in the ways that our human view is part of that seeing, and in highlighting the human view so we can try and see around it and beyond it. And this next poem is titled Held Treasured Secret. To carry something fragile, a vole skull, for example, or the thin, ridged shell of a paper nautilus, make a cage of yourself, curl fingers stiff around a space you could close to a fist. And at first it's easy, but you fear your scattered mind. Careful, careful, careful each footfall. You worry about the little gap where your smallest finger touches your health line. The short walk home stretches long. Try a few positions of the arm, a head, elbow dug into the waist, palm cupped up, ulna tight across diaphragm or ovary, radius tucked below the hip swing. It's not easy, though nothing is heavy. Your hand sweats and cramps, and one part of you longs to just let it go. But you picked it up. You've carried it this far, this thing, and now it must be held until you find a safe place, desk, car, sill by the door, to put it down. And I'm just going to read this third poem that's in this issue. And it's titled Identification. And just so you can settle in without trying to figure what the hell I'm talking about, I am very lucky to help out with some field work with humpback whales and gray sails where I live on Cape Cod. And we do a lot of photo documentation of these animals to be able to recognize them over a season and between years. The markings on their bodies, whether it's the patterns in their fur for the seals, or the patterns on their skin for the whales, or the scars they accumulate, are one of the most helpful ways of recognizing individuals. Identification. We know them most easily by how we often know those othered scars. What's wrong, you ask, and I'm pleased you noticed what I thought I'd hid. Shall I list some? Coral's trailing edge raked hard by teeth, piano's flanks sliced by prop into keyboard, Pele's barnacle dot. Nothing, I say, noting the spot on your cheek that's emerged the last few years. Banyan's shredded fluke, music, pleats, venom, Cajun, all marked by killer whale, by boat, by what monofilament has cut away. Our faces, my sweet, are no longer blank slates remade each day. At rest, they speak. I focus the lens, document the known and the new. Pink means fresh wound, rope made, hull and prop made, the body healing. Sweetheart, I'm less interested in those old marks than what worries begin to mark you now. I note it all. Time, location, association. Is there a calf? Yes, 6-month-old and already twice scarred, twice freed. Maybe that young wound will heal. I hook a bra, pull on shorts, glad for what they hide. I know my hidden stories, stretch marks, sag, scar. Naked, unhoused, every surface surrounded by moving matter. How can we know a whale? Sound thrumming up the jaw to ear, voice, what? Not what, but how, tone. Did you say? What are you not saying? Inside the body's vast resonances, where echoes can't be known, can be ignored, can offer what we all turn away from. So thank you. And now I get to listen.
Thank you, Liz. I could feel Eva listening in on that last one. I'm gonna do that. Next up, we have Coggin. She is the inaugural poet laureate of Hot Springs, Arkansas, and the author of 4 collections, most recently Mining for Stardust. And I think a lot of us know her for her long, amazing service as the host of the longest running consecutive weekly open mic series in the country, the Wednesday Night Poetry.
Thank you so much, Erin. Thank you, Nickole and Michael and everyone affiliated with this project and for the long work that you've done amplifying the voices of the natural world in the more than human kingdom. I'm Coggin, like Erin said. I live in Hot Springs National Park, and for the last 2 years, I've been a master naturalist. And it has really changed and evolved my whole way of navigating the world. I have a new collection coming out on Earth Day, and it's called Mother of Other Kingdoms, and it addresses my ways that I mother plants and animals and bugs and all our wild creatures that my wife and I have here in our valley. If you've ever tried to grow tomatoes, This first poem is for the little creatures that like to come and enjoy those tomatoes while they are ripening. This is called Ode to the Hornworm for Manduca sexta. O vibrant, sticky-footed goblin, alien lord of some deeper knowing, great green decimator of tomatoes, I come to the garden with a plan this morning, steely-eyed and ready to follow the skeletal remains of once blooming foliage and ripening red planets, ready to come and pick you off gently with the gloved fingers of this gardener I've become, determined to put an end to your destructive hunger, only to find you there in all your bright emerald wonder, your glowing body there on the vine, divine, invisibly perfect in your chlorophyll camouflage, bulbous and plump from engorging green, you fattened, gorgeous thing. O glorious hornworm, munching Manduca sexta, I cannot pluck you from this desperate plant without first acknowledging the glory of your stiff red-horned tail. You backwards facing predator trickster unicorn, your white stripes that parallel the lines of leaves, the shape of your green curvature and swell. You will devour and deflower an entire canopy of tomato leaves overnight. You will scar fruiting dreams, break their tender skins, shit tiny green grenades with tenacity, grow and grow and grow. I pluck you as the tomatoes weep and lay you in my glove. Here, let me carry you. Just let me look at you and your insatiable brothers squirming here in my palm, squishy bodies plump with the pulsing green of life. You latch your little succulent feet to the vines of my fingers and turn yourself sphinx. Posture yourself ancient mystery. Lift your torso and head to see with all of your eyes this human disturbance to your photosynthetic meal, to you becoming sunlight itself. Your suctioned feet grip tight to me like Velcro, as though Mother Nature hugs me through your 10 prolegs. Oh, not so little hornworm of ample proportions, you dance wild and sectional towards sky, inching toward the unknown, becoming sphinx. Dear bright one, how do you get away with being so unabashedly otherworldly? How do you actually become a whole other being? How do you molt away in stars, in stars? How do you teach your bodies to fall away when they no longer fit your growth? Teach me this language of transformation. Teach me how I can burrow into darkness and still come out as hummingbird moth, flower drinker, winged Egyptian, almost bird. You here, your verdant brothers, all brilliant and brimming with the juices of earth in my hand. I bow all my fingers toward you, my you-sized human reflections of thanks, sphinx my knuckles in gratitude, and move you far, far away from my tomatoes. So I do have a picture that I wanted to share real quick. This is actually, I don't know if you can see it, but no, you can't. Okay, that's too meta for me, sorry. But it was just a picture of a bunch of these fat hornworms in my palm, and they were just so beautiful. And everything, the whole natural world is just so, so beautiful if we just look closely enough. I'm gonna end with this poem. It's called Black Snake for Pantheropus obsoletus. Driving home from the vet, where our old dog gets a ketamine injection for his chronic osteoarthritis pain, he and I drive by a large black rat snake, splayed, bloody, and writhing in the middle of our street, halfway out of his misery, run over with his snake body glistening like an oil slick, his entrails trailing a bright red pool, organs green and fleshy, protruding ghastly. I slow to check on the poor creature, roll the window down to see if he is dead or not. Thick life stopped short and he moves, shapes and coils his body into, I swear, a heart, a swirl, a sign he's still here, yet unsalvageable. He lifts his head toward me. His round eyes meet mine, and I think of those cowboy movies where the gentle sheriff has to shoot his horse because it's broken its leg clomping through a rocky ditch. And do I carry this stark compassion in my bones? At the moment, no. I drive home, carry my old dog inside, and tell my wife of the black snake in the road. Is it suffering? Oh, Kai, it's suffering. She runs out the door, frantically paces the deck for a moment. How are you going to do it? I ask. Don't ask me that question right now. Tires skid reverse, and I walk inside thinking of pleading snake eyes and a type of bravery that's unnamed. I look at Genghis, our old sleeping good boy, his eyes drowsy from the ketamine, but the warmth and love in them still shine with the trust of a young puppy, his body curled into a heart. Thank you so much, everybody.
Kai, that was just incredible. And I love it's not just the caterpillar, but you even talk about the poo of the caterpillar and make it into a beautiful, beautiful thing. Our next reader is Brittney Corrigan. And Brittney is a poet. The book Solasthesia is absolutely incredible. And she's currently working on her first short story collection. And she is dialing in from Portland, Oregon. Please welcome Brittney.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. It's such a joy to be reading with all of these writers whose work I so admire. And thanks to About Place Journal and Black Earth Institute and Nickole and Erin for bringing us all together. I am going to launch right into my piece so that I can read it to you in its entirety. And all I'll tell you is that this was based on a documentary that I saw years ago about two cheetah brothers in Etosha National Park in the Namibia. Suffer. My brother and I have been walking across the desert for many turns of light and dark. We walk rib to rib, so close that the yellow fur of our shoulders blends together, black spots merging when one of us stumbles and leans into the other for support. We separated from our mother some time ago, as is our way when cubs are old enough to hunt for themselves. It has been so long since our last meal, we barely remember the taste of impala, how the flesh felt against our rough tongues. This is the Namib, and orange sands shift around our paws. The vultures stalk us, circling. I am afraid the sun will eat us before we find a watering hole. We are alone, Bariz and I, but we are not alone. The humans keep their distance, but we can smell them on the hot wind. They point machines with long noses at us, but we know the machines are not guns. We have seen guns before and have heard how they crack the air and echo out to the horizon. We have seen how sometimes humans use guns to capture our kind, and we do not know where these unlucky ones are taken. My brother was captured once, but he does not remember anything after he fell on his side in the dirt. The sun had just pulled the whole of its body into the sky when the humans came for him. I cried and cried all day, my voice like a wounded bird in the bush. He was returned just as the sun was bloodying the rim of our world, and I licked his face until he awakened. He wears a collar around his neck now with a large bulge like a knuckle bone at his throat, and humans follow us wherever we go. Denari, my name is a faint rumble in my brother's mouth. I cannot go any farther, my brother. Bariz's lean body is like a branch that splinters from its tree in a storm. He sits down on the blazing sand, and it seems that the spots on his back fade into the dust. His legs have grown thinner than mine, and it is hard to remember how, before this journey, we were so fast we could outrun all the other animals. Wildebeest, gemsboks, zebras, their stripes and horns and shaggy faces a blur as we sprinted after the herds, singling out the ones who fell behind. We would hunt together, our muscles strong, our bones slender and light as we raced across the veldt. Now, Beriz lowers himself onto his empty belly, empty as mine, and curls his long tail around his face to shade his amber eyes from the midday sun. We have stopped, and so the humans have stopped too. The mechanical beast they ride is many yards away from us, but I can hear it sigh and go to sleep. I hear the long-nosed machines in the humans' hands click, spin, whir, click, like insects running from the pangolin's long tongue. The machines are pointed at us, and I think they replace the humans' inferior eyes. Brother, I say, we must keep going. I nudge my black-striped snout into his. I hear the wind lift the feathers on the vulture's wide wings. But Beriz does not move. He does not answer me. After a hunt, we pant to cool our exhausted bodies with the bellows of our huge lungs. But Beriz is hardly panting at all. I have to press myself against him to feel the reassurance of his breath. Brother, I say again. The high pitch of my voice scurries across the expanse of desert, startles the humans and their lesser ears. Click, spin, whir, click. Let us walk a little more. We will find water. Let us not summon the vultures and their sun-baked skulls. The voices of the humans drift to me through the shimmering air. I look up at them, away from Beriz. Why do they do nothing but stare? Once I saw a human collapse, his tall body crumpling to the ground. The other humans circled him, kneeling like lions around a kill, but no. They put their hands on him. They leaned their ears close, hovering above his mouth. They shouted and then lifted him from the earth. They led him to the shade and brought him water. I had seen how they care for their own, like our mother tended my brother and me. But our mother is far away. It is me and it is Beriz, and we are alone, even though we are not alone. I nudge my brother again, but still he does not move. Why do the humans not help us? Can't they see that Beriz is unwell? I bark and chirp at them, calling the way we called for our mother when we were young. Do the humans not care if the creature who wears their collar lives or dies? I lie down next to my brother and lick his face, but his eyes do not open. Beriz, I cry, my mouth against his mouth. But I cannot hear my brother's heart. I cannot feel his breath in my nostrils. A vulture lands on the sand a few feet off, and then another and another. I snarl, show them my teeth. They hop closer, bowing their red wrinkled heads and fixing me with their black eyes. How can I leave my brother? But these birds tell me this is the way of our world, of the Namib. Click, spin, whir, click. Will the humans stay to watch my brother turn to bones? If I walk away, they will lose me when the darkness comes. Thirst claws at my throat. But I cannot leave Beriz, even as the wings around us begin to hide the sun. I stare at the humans over the setting of my brother's body. How will I walk this desert alone? Thank you.
Ah, Brittney, I knew that I was coming next after you're going to read that and I would be crying. It's my pleasure to introduce Todd Davis, who's calling in from Pennsylvania. He's author of many, many fine books of poetry, most recently Coffin Honey and Native Species. And he's won a Midwest Book Award and a bunch of others, including the Gwendolyn Brooks Poetry Prize. And I use his work when I teach, and unfortunately I don't get to do that very often anymore, so it's wonderful to hear him here.
Thanks so much, Erin and Nickole and Michael. and all these writers, some of them who are friends in life beyond the book, but all of you are friends in life on the page. Your work means so much to me. And for the people that are joining us here, I just want to say, loving the world, knowing that we are an animal, but not an animal above other animals, and giving our lives over to loving this world and trying to heal these divisions, it matters. And there are all kinds of paths towards that. My father was a veterinarian, so my earliest memories, starting at 3 and 4, is helping rubbing down puppies when they've just been born. But then soon after that, touching broken bodies or diseased bodies, sick bodies, but then recovering bodies, healing bodies. And I just think of the joy that my father took in healing these animals' bodies and seeing the joy in their bodies as they could use them again, how that mattered. Or if the body was crippled, how he would try to devise, with the help of owners and other people. I grew up in a factory town in northern Indiana with a lot of small, inventive, small business owners. All these factories, a lot of them were small factories that supplied Detroit. People came up with ways, this was in the 60s and 70s, of devising devices for a dog, for example, who no longer could use its back legs. And so how could we have a device that would help it move around? So there are many ways to get there. And I wasn't a healer, but stories matter. The stories we tell matter, how they bring us into contact with these other creatures that make our very lives possible. So there's a bear that's been wandering through my work for more than a decade. Where I live, we have lots of black bear, very large black bear. The largest bear ever harvested, black bear here in Pennsylvania, was 875 pounds. One just about 3 years ago that was hit by a car, and the damage we do with our cars, our vehicles, is so devastating. But it was over 900 pounds. You know, a lot of places that have black bears, if you have competing grizzlies, you don't have black bear that grow this large. And so when I was finishing Coughlin honey, where Ursus, this black bear, figures quite prominently in Coughlin honey and in the healing of a boy who's been violated by his uncle, about halfway through that book, I was having doubts, as we writers do. And it was June, when all our mountain laurel is in blossom on the mountain, and boars, male black bears, wander many, many miles to find a mate. And I was on the mountain, and the largest black bear I've had a very close encounter with came out of a laurel grove, out of these beautiful pink blossoms, and was standing less than 15 feet away from me. And it was definitely, if I'm being conservative, over 500 pounds, but I think it was easily over 600-pound black bear. And I've had many encounters with bears, and you don't necessarily want to lock eyes, right? But our eyes locked. And we were both just so surprised and shocked with each other. And it was probably somewhere between 20 and 30 seconds, but it felt longer. And then he turned and moved back through the laurel, and I turned and moved back through the laurel. But it felt like a blessing that it was okay to write about him. And so these poems are about Ursus, visiting the house of water. Ursus has never seen the ocean, but he swims the mountain's green sea in the month of May. With each stroke, claws ransack logs, capsize rocks, tear the sides of speckled fawns to fill the ravine of his ravenous need, chasing away the dream inside long winter months, a beetle that eats from the inside, stringing muscle and skinning him to a skeletal twin. Within this embrace, the hot smell of a sow bear draws him out of himself and into the space she opens. Acceptance, helping him to understand what it means to join another, to make another life that will outlive him. As she must, the sow casts Ursus outside the fence of her love to protect her cubs. We've heard stories about those thrown overboard, set adrift. I've seen Ursus's head among laurel flowers, face wreathed in pink as he searches the horizon for a small black body that looks like him, rowing the deepest troughs of green, the overturning waves in the highest branches that splash in the wind. And the second poem is called Light of the World. And these poems I dedicated to my friend David James Duncan, who just had his novel Sun House come out this past summer in August. And I use the term Sun House in here. Light of the World. Behind the spidered roots of a wind-thrown hemlock, Ursus hides a speckled trout midstream, porpoise to eat mayflies, born with no mouth and only 2 days to live. The sides of these fish steal orange from the mountain's western slope, and their red spots, circled with blue sky, remind Ursus of the bee balm that grows along the stream. In his second year, he cut his left foot as he crossed the road at the spine of the mountain, some drunk-thrown bottle hobbling him until the shard caught on a log and slid out with the ruddy smear of a crescent moon. Ursus prays without a word for prayer, crawling the bank's edge, scattering trout who swim under rocks. Some call this bliss, others sun house. Ursus paws the water, ripples the light of the world painted over tens of thousands of years on the sides of these fish who somehow persist. 2 ridges to the south, a stream rusts, and nothing lives because of the coal our grandfathers carried to the surface. Ursus sits, allowing the self to depart, and soon the fish think the bear has become stone and begin to rise to the flies who are dying, spinning to the water's surface, their funeral boats set adrift. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Todd. Those are incredible. I live here in Asheville, North Carolina, and lots of black bears here, lots of them. And your poems really do speak to me. I'm reading Coughlin Honey now and just absolutely love it. Our next author is a wonderful, wonderful writer. Her name is Alison Hawthorne Deming. And I have to say, I read her zoologies years ago and it changed me. I thought, oh, wait, I want to be among animals. I want to write about them. And she has 6 books of poetry, 5 of nonfiction. And she is a Regents professor at the University of Arizona, but she is in Mexico right now. So please welcome Alison.
Hi, everybody. I'm really thrilled to be with this group of writers who I love and admire, many of you among my dear friends. And I'm especially grateful to Nickole and Erin for the editorial time they put in to give this gift to our minds and hearts in our relationship with the animal world. So thank you, thank you. Yes, I am in San Cristobal de las Casas, which is in the state of Chiapas, down south near the border of Guatemala. It faces many of the same border issues as we do in Arizona. I'm here thanks to a little fellowship that gave me 2 weeks here last January and 2 weeks here this January. And this is, I'm just going to read 2 poems about jaguars. The jaguars are very, very sacred to the Mayan people. And this is an area of Mexico that's where Mayan descended people live. And one of the things that has struck me in my travels here is how we know so much about this great ancestral culture through art. We wouldn't know what Mayans wore at a wedding ceremony 700 years ago if we didn't have it in the stelae that were left in their artwork. And also their art helps us to get closer, perhaps, to these magnificent cats that were once held sacred. So 2 poems of things I experienced last year, and hope this will end up being a book It's very inspiring being here. If you ever have a chance to come here, just don't drink the water. Don't even brush your teeth with it. The first jaguar stopped at the tiendita looking for gifts. Found one among the flowered huipils and pillowcases, a work in clay atop a shelf where a prowl of jaguars stood. Fierce mother, one cub in mouth, the way a house cat hauls her kitten into hiding. A second cub riding her back. Mother's face, no kitty sweetness, but her lips pulled back, taut in growl, while holding her tender grip. She knows what it takes to live in the jungle. Don't fuck with my kids. I know her language. She knows mine. The second jaguar. At the House of Indigenous Writers, a puppeteer showed us how he taught children the names of animals in their native language, though most of them spoke in the tongue of the conquest. He had an old face, one seasoned by joy. I could tell by the lines on his face that love had been the better part of his days. He brought out a painted serpent, slipped his arm into the empty body to animate its spirit, then pirate, then jaguar. With each character, the man's voice took on the cadence of the creature. The jaguar, he said, was very sacred. I did not know what the word meant to him, but I understand that without the right words, the animal could not be known, and that some words that had made the creature sacred had already been lost to the world. I heard of a tribe that lives at the confluence of two rivers in Colombia. For them, all creatures are people. Jaguar is a person wearing a jaguar skin. So people are obligated to the animal world as to one's family. That's what I wish we had become. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. As always, you are my hero of combining science and the world and the heart, as always. So I met Kelly Groom in a van at coming from the airport at an AWP many years ago, and she spoke to me about her job, which was a job that I kind of now have a similar one. And I remember going home from that meeting and looking Kelly up online and seeing how incredibly prolific and wonderful an author she was. And that has been something that I have held on to, that you can be a service in the literary world and be an amazing author. So Kelly Groom is the author of How to Live, a memoir and essays, and I Wore the Ocean in the Shape of a Girl, and which was a Barnes & Noble great new writers selection and a New York Times book review editor's choice. And in addition to that, 4 collections of poetry and many other things.
Thank you so much. I remember that van ride and meeting you. Thank you to Nickole. Thank you, Michael, Black Earth Institute. It's wonderful to be here with you all. What a joy to see your faces and hear your work. I'm reading a tiny essay that takes place here in New Smyrna Beach, Florida, where I have returned from Provincetown. Mother. The study of moths is mothing. The student is a mother, though it's pronounced differently from the word that means the female parent of a child. Most moth information seems to be on killing or deterring them, protecting clothes, unless the moths are making silk, though once I heard them called enchanted, the one who attracts and sings. A large brown moth had been flying around my kitchen at the beach. After my surgery, Terry had said, imagine your ideal life, then try to get as close to it as you can. All I could see was the ocean, a room with lots of windows. I quit work at the shelter, moved to the coast, rented the top floor of a house right on the ocean, 100 years old, paint peeling. My front door fell off its hinges. The roof was held together by swarms of carpenter ants. Wind brought the ocean inside. Salt coated everything. My mirrors looked like they'd been out in the rain. My dad called it the wreck of the Hesperus. All day and night, I heard the waves. The wall facing the ocean was all windows. I kept them open, and the moon came right in, woke me up, wanting to play. It shone a path from outer space across the ocean to my futon in the living room, as if I could go downstairs and walk that path out into the ocean. I couldn't stand to sleep in the windowless bedroom, to be that far away. The moth had come in through a window. It had been days since I'd seen the moth. When he showed up in my shower, water splashing, I'd reached for my shampoo, and the moth flew from behind, clung to my shower head. It wouldn't budge, though I said, this is no good, you'll drown. I scooched the moth out with a blue bottle of conditioner. Round wings kept winging toward my see-through shower curtain. I was worried the moth would fly overhead between the rings and sink like paper in the rain, crumple at my feet. So I banged the plastic outward to warn her off. Later, I worried, what did the moth have to eat? It seemed moth food would be outside. After all, that's where moths live. So I waved a piece of toilet paper. I know moths like something fine to cling to, and scooped her inside a plastic jar. Gently shook out onto the porch by the doormat in the dark. The moth didn't move. It was cold, very windy. I took the trash out. The slightly darker than night, wing-like shape still hadn't moved. I shone a flashlight on the moth. Nothing. I saw tiny dark eyes, as if a pencil tip could be an eye, a pepper grain, but not even a shutter. I missed the wings beating so fast in my bath that I couldn't even see wings, just the blur of a creature flying in place. That's when I worried that I'd wounded the moth with all my go here, go there, my bulky plastic. I drove to the grocery store, forgot what I needed, so went down every aisle. Came home much later, loaded down with bags, leaned against the door to find my keys, and the slightly darker shadow was still there, unmoving. I went upstairs, got my flashlight again, shone it on the moth, and still no flicker. I brought another piece of toilet paper with me, a ladder under the moth's feet, and she climbed on immediately. I carried the moth inside, climbing the folds in the paper. When I was certain the moth wouldn't suffocate in that bedding like a baby with too many covers, when I saw the moth's head rising above the tissue, I left her for the night. But then I worried about the dark, how the moth loved, I thought, the light bulbs in my bathroom, how the moth had been drawn earlier to my windows. The Turtle Watch people had warned me that my lights had been bright, so maybe this was all my fault. The moth mistook me for the moon. She had just been trying to navigate and saw my house as the horizon. With the moth settled on the tissue downstairs, I turned my reading light down the staircase to comfort her near the bottom. But then I read that moths are nocturnal, they like the dark. And so I turned the lights off so the moth could relax and get some rest from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. I love how like so many of these pieces just really stop to look at creatures we would overlook, and you have this whole narrative with just this moth. Just beautiful. Our next reader is Kathryn Nuernberger, and I'm really excited to hear her read. For years ago, I used to work at Saraband Books, and I went back and visited not that long ago and was talking to the new editor there about an environmental poetry festival that I'm putting together. And she said, wait a minute, you have to read this book. And that was The Witch of I, and put it in my hands. And it is absolutely incredible. Kathryn also has some poetry collections through BOA, and teaches at the creative writing program at the University of Minnesota.
Thank you so much, Nickole. That's so kind of you. Thank you, Erin and Michael as well. I love this journal, and this particular issue just blew my mind. It's really an honor to be reading with all of you here tonight and getting to hear these pieces aloud. I'll read a short essay from my current work in progress, which is a series of flash essays about mutualisms. I usually have to do a song and dance explaining what a mutualism is, but I think this audience will know, and I sort of explain it in the essay too. Strangers. Pitcher plants grow one tall and elegant leaf that curls itself into a tunnel with a lip that stands just barely agape. It is a long hallway of a plant with a door that does not quite close. Voices murmuring forth whisper an entire lifetime of half-heard and misunderstood secrets. A carnivorous plant, the pitcher lures flies into that gorgeous throat with a scent of rotting nectar. Then a bat comes and slips its delicate tongue, perfectly evolved, to lick down into the Icarus belly to feast on the half-digested soup of insect prey. It leaves behind nutrient-rich guano in exchange, and together the pitcher and the bat are nourished and satisfied. Where I live now, much farther north than those long-tongued bats, pitcher plants fill whole bogs with the gardens of themselves. They are smaller than their tropical cousins, and their symbiosis is only with a single species of fly, who lives as a larva floating on the tiny pond of digestive juices until it is ready to helicopter out of this familiar womb into that strange sliver of blue at the edge of the known world. Once fully grown, the fly will return to pollinate and then lay eggs in the plant that once was its home. Brian, who I love in part for how easily he knows what people mean and what they want to hear, says I should talk less about microscopic creatures. He says anyone can relate to bats, but no one cares about the larva of a fly. I care, I say. I didn't throw myself into years of researching mutualisms and relationships because I understand others well. I did it because I don't. Many times I have watched bats flickering at the edge of a streetlight for the slow length of a falling dusk. It is not easier to imagine their world, constructed out of clicks and echoes, than it is the fly's view through 1,000 optic nerves and receptors, each pinprick stitched to the others in a sensation of one continuous whole world. When the first pitcher plant of the season has lifted her face from the thick mud of the newly forming earth, I pull Brian down to see. As our knees grow damp on the moss, I lift up the lid of leaf to show him how the dew and rain mix with the plant's own enzymes. He seems charmed, perhaps by the plant, more likely by my urgent and messianic lessons about such inconsequential things. But he's trying to feel the bog as I do, and I'm trying to explain it in a way so he can meet me here. Here, in the tiny pool at the heart of a leaf, whirling with dying and feeding, becomings you can hardly perceive and barely understand. Thank you.
Kathryn knows that I am extremely drawn to her in her interests, and my interests often overlap, and so I'm always looking forward to the next thing she's going to do that I'm going to absolutely love. Next up is Leah Purpura, who was part of my grad school faculty, and for whom 3 years I just was astounded by her brilliance and unable to speak in her presence because of it. She's probably laughing at this.
She is laughing.
Leah is the author of 9 collections of essays, poems, and translations. She was a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award for On Looking. which were essays from Saraband. Her awards include a Guggenheim, an NEA, a Fulbright Fellowship, as well as 5 push carts and the Associated Writing Programs Award in Nonfiction. So you see why it's a little intimidating.
Erin, thank you for inviting me, and thank you, Nickole. Now I will say that all over again. Thank you so much for inviting me. And Nickole and Erin especially, it's so good to connect back up with you from very different sort of parts of my life. So it's great to be here. I think I may be reading for the very quietest creature gathered among us, lichen. This is a very short essay, and it's thinking on a lot of things, but especially on the way that our concepts of beauty and ways of seeing might need to be upended right now if we are to save ourselves and others. So it's called Lichens and Anti-Apocalyptic. Lichens were never the subjects of still lifes. They might have been if we didn't love such lavish measures of the end, our earthly desires and vanities arranged by the Dutch masters as fat wheels of cheese, bright lemons peeled to their velvety pith, pheasants curing on filigreed trays, and over it all, like a pearly-held breath, late sunlight through a kitchen window, briefly warming eggs in a bowl, icing the stems of chalices, everything paused, posed, and gloriously sheened before the coming dark. Lichens do nothing lavishly. They crust over stone and patches of bark. They rash the length of rocky coasts. Even at their most alive, they look at first glance completely done. Look harder, into the sallow, pocked surface of a simple green shield or spangled rosette, my teardrop-shaped jeweler's loop, eye pressed to it, lens against the rock, and there are the layers of tufted petals, hyphae clustered like organ pipes, and underneath the hair-like filaments holding tight to the face of the world. And though I'd need a finer scope to see the collaborations at work, the way algae gathers light and air to make sugar for the sheltering fungus, if I remember to make vast my sight, I too can know the transformations that over time, lichen weather ancient rock, break it apart, dissolve it with acids, and as they die, offer those minerals back to the ground. And if I think in traceries, I can feel in everything I grow and eat the slow sifting of lichens through me. Lichens disquiet the subjects of still lifes, what lush is, how abundance comes. Their clay greens, powder grays, and chalky gold specks, those soft and diffuse colors challenge me. I, who have needed the high blush of a ripe pear to impassion a scene, and plums washed of their protective bloom, so I might see my reflection therein. For so long, I've courted the fiery verge, flumes of whitewater, the drama of thresholds, crises slow coming, then all of a sudden, like the moment of our current dying. Since lichens were never the subject of still lifes, we missed the chance to train our sight on the stretch of eons, the reach of eras, on lichen time, how to imagine a body crossing an epoch, what it looks like to reconstitute after decades of thirst, or to thrive in the heat of volcanic springs below miles of ice inside the very body of granite. what flowering is after irradiation, how to dwell in impossible places. We who call winter death, not resting, have no eye for forms in the making, no eye for the nibblers and leechers who will, in their way, take in our bones and change us again. Our job for the moment, I mean ever after, repair the story of transience. Lichens are slow lives. No, that's not right. Let me reassemble the language. Slow lives. Not a singular, but a colloquy. Biome upon biome, algae and fungi paired up with worms, bacteria, yeasts, so many enthreaded ways of being, and none divisible, nothing a mere part. All of it lichen. You might even say lichen, a lichen are systems plus beings plus dwelling places, sites of exchange and regeneration, some forms breaking off and rerouting, some finding each other in air and mingling, settling on boulders, pilings, fences, spreading on weathered slats of old barns, spangled on windfall underfoot, shingled into hummingbirds' nests overhead. The work this moment most needs, retraining the eye that loves the end. Thanks.
Retraining the eye that loves the end. So beautiful. You know, Leah, for years now, my first encounter with you was reading On Looking, and I've thought so much about everything, the premise of that book. Look harder, look again. What is your responsibility of looking? And I that piece demonstrates so much, not just about science, but really looking at something so quiet. Our next reader is Heather Swan, whom I adore, nonfiction writer, a poet as well. Heather teaches writing and environmental literature in Madison, Wisconsin, and I love this. She lives with her family, a German Shepherd, and about 60,000 bees.
Thanks, Nickole. I want to say thank you to all of you for doing this important work, and I wish that the whole world could hear this reading. Just astonishing. So thank you all for doing that work. It's funny because my books are mostly about insects and small little creatures, and this piece that I wrote for About Place is actually about a shark encounter that I had. The first movie I ever saw in a movie theater was the movie Jaws, and it really affected me, as it might anyone. But then when I was in my 20s, I went snorkeling and came face to face with one, and for years I told this story as if I was, that I had like survived this thing, and I was so lucky to have gotten away from this monster. And my daughter, who is now in her 20s, called me out on it, and she said, the story that you're telling is actually really damning to the shark. And so I thought, that's true. And so I needed to go back and tell a different story about the shark. And so the essay is too long to read in this period of time, so I'm just going to read a little section of it. Beneath the choppy surface awaited a world that made the colorful paintings of Matisse and Chagall seem dull. The blues fluidly morphed from turquoise to cerulean to teal as the sunlight was broken by the waves above. Below us, the reef seemed vast and teemed with life. At that time, the effects of ocean acidification had only just begun. Bright magenta sea fans undulated next to thick branches of peach-colored coral. Parrotfish floated past us like little neon signs. Scores of humbug damselfish with their zebra stripes and lemon yellow butterfly fish zigzagged about the mounds of coral peppered with sea cucumbers and anemones. Suddenly, a good-sized hawksbill turtle swam into view, and my friend and I decided with hand signals to follow it. The turtle propelled himself gracefully into deeper and deeper water and took us further and further from the boat. The blues deepened. We followed, mesmerized, unconscious of time or distance. But then I glanced up and saw it, the Jaws poster. Coming out of the blue-gray of distance, the grimacing rows of deadly teeth, the light belly, the enormous gray snout was headed straight for me. We locked eyes. Despite the reputation for their blank, deadpan stare, white sharks have deep indigo eyes that can see well in daylight and in darkness due to extra mirrored crystals behind the retina of the back of their eyes. They see contrast well, so bright yellow or patterns like black and white are very clear to them. They don't have eyelids and will roll their eyes back in their heads before they attack. Many sharks' faces are covered with scars from other animals scratching them. This shark did not look away or roll her eyes. Had she been watching us pawing awkwardly after the turtle? White sharks can smell a teaspoon of blood hundreds of meters away. 2/3 of their brain is dedicated to smell. Had I scraped my knee by accident? Was I bleeding? Or had she smelled my sunblock? I imagine these sharks encounter so many smells: the smells of gasoline, the dumping of waste from cruise ships, the dead fish returned after the fisherman's culling, hair gel, sweat, or sometimes the body of a mate full of sea want. White sharks also have a sixth sense called electroreception because of their ampullae de Lorenzini. These cells actually pick up electrical currents which move through the saltwater, giving the shark an incredibly accurate method of detecting other bodies in the water. They can literally feel the energy of another creature. They can find them in the dark. Her ampullae de Lorenzini must have pulsed along her body as she sensed the fear radiating from mine, our energies drawing together like an electric zipper closing the space between us. I smacked my companion, sped up to the surface, sputtering, and spun to look for the boat. Was it 200 feet away or 2 miles? The waves were rough and gray, my body unequipped to outswim a shark who could move through seawater at 35 miles per hour. As I swam, adrenaline coursing through my body, I thought, if I die now, I've had a good life. If I lose a limb, I can keep swimming. Just swim, don't look back. White sharks have excellent ears. What could she hear, I wonder now? Water rushing, garbled with air bubbles rising, with each thrust in and out of my limbs, similar to when a seal or a dolphin breaches, or maybe the growl of speedboats motoring through the waves, a warning. On other days, tankers, sputtering oil wells, freight hauling ships loaded with American girl dolls and bike tires, explosives, the ping of sonar, the hiss of fishing nets dropping into the sea, the endless engines, but sometimes also the song of humpback whales, the chatter of dolphins, the clack of seagull beaks fishing. When I hauled myself breathlessly onto the boat and screeched to the boat captain about what had happened, he was envious. He told us we were so lucky to have seen her. For years, I've told this story, most often to my students, the story of how lucky I was to escape this dreaded monster. None of men's fantasies of evil can compare with the reality of Jaws, claimed the Jaws trailer. But what we make monstrous, we make murderable. Tragically, we have done this historically with those of our own species. Sharks also suffer from our stories. In the years after the film Jaws was made, shark populations off the coast of North America declined by 50%. Oh, big fish, I whispered to myself, please accept my apology. Thank you.
Heather, that was amazing. And I got to tell you, that was one of the first pieces that Nickole and I were like, that right there. We were both like the empathy and the putting yourself in a creature that seems so other was exactly what we were hoping. And it was one of the first ones that she and I both were like, yep, that one. It's my pleasure to introduce Jennifer K. Sweeney. She is the author of 4 poetry collections, Fox Logic Fireweed, which really is my favorite title of the last year. Little Spells, which was the James Laughlin Award winner, How to Live on Bread and Music, and Salt Memory. And I have been reading Jennifer's work as solace often because it is so richly sonic that it brings you back into your body. So I'm looking forward to this.
Thank you so much, Erin, for that. I read you as solace as well. What a lovely thing to say. Thank you, Erin. Thank you, Nickole. Thank you, Michael. This is really, really special, and I'm so pleased to be here reading with everyone. I spent my childhood in New England, basically roaming around through forests alone, and my adulthood in California forests. I even named my son Forrest. The I in my poems is almost always myself, but a few years ago, I decided trying to write a series of poems where I just wrote from the creature or the plant or the insect themselves, where the I got to be the creature. And I tried to task myself with the idea of could I untrouble my own voice and my syntax as much as possible. And so I'd like to read the three of these that were included in About Place Journal. I write these very slowly because I need to do a lot of listening to hear them. And I'd written about 30 when Erin and Nickole put their call out. So it felt like exactly the right place that to receive this work. First one is called Lady Slipper. It's a wild native orchid that grew in Connecticut forests. It's illegal to pick them in Connecticut because they can live for many years on their own. And there was one in the forest that I wandered in. I knew where it was and I visited it, but I did not tell anybody about it. Lady Slipper. To find me over the crisscross places without losing center. One delicate hiding meant for its own private witness. We don't all want to be hung on the beauty mantle, nor have the possession that something lovely seen be wanted for all time. My bloom, blush, mercy of years, is the answer that comes after the question has buried itself in the asking. Some have tried, but they could not break open the seed. Now we go over to California, and this is the California black bear. Seeing time comes again, sliding its overshine up the peaks. Oh, that it comes so soon now, scrabbling to reach all the layers to the brownest dark, where darkness hides itself in holes. Don't sing to me, sweet, deep, dark, when the berries are red, and I can thicket paw through. I am mouthfuls in the swish of a warm while. One bear, two, we pad deep in yarrow. Which hum to follow, which hum goes gold. Trundle the stream, we unsleep into water that is one water, elegant and cool. Lucky swipe a fish, go where the one water goes. Thin shine now, when the light leaves, it leaves to nothing. And we'll stay in California for the golden chinkapin. Then turn, in the sky tumble of a full crown, then thickly sway in slow notes, slat light and the slow doze of fruit, chocolate brown and night shined, inside the inside of pith and husk and pin, needle them so, then golden in October's drews, chink from chinka, from chinqua, from big, large, great, great body lined bright red beneath dark loaves of trunk, then sweeten. Pods crack at the hinge, night shined, pin, from min, from seed, from me. Thanks.
Thank you, Jennifer. That was just like so delicious in the ear, just absolutely beautiful. Our next reader is Annie Wenstrup. She is Denina and lives in Fairbanks, Alaska with her family. She's a Smithsonian Arctic Studies Fellow, which is just, I would love to hear so much more about this. Sounds absolutely amazing. An Indigenous Nations Poetry Fellow and a Story Knife Fireweed Fellow. Please welcome her.
Thank you, Nickole, and thank you, everybody. It's so good to see everyone and to hear the reading. This is an excerpt from my essay From Here. I hear a man's voice, deep and radio bland, announce, from time immemorial, the Alaska Native people have been stewards of this land. They've protected the land and the waterways throughout the state. Some version of this campaign is always playing to protect the caribou or the salmon. It's true. Indigenous people steward the land and live in tandem with the more than human world. I used to bristle at the campaign's phrasing, time immemorial. It suggests a story without written documentation, a concept that makes the colonized parts of me uncomfortable. Once, I was also concerned about the linking of Indigenous identity with the more than human world. Too much of American literature conflates Indigenous identity with the land to justify colonization and domination. But now I'm embracing the idea. I am rethinking the emphasis that white academic culture places on written documentation. I am setting aside the belief that land can be possessed. I am also coming to understand that if I want to say I am from here, I must reframe my relationships with the land and my communities while reframing the chronotope I live in. Some things I know from observation. The chickadees look identical until they don't. Some wear their caps higher or lower on their brow. Some are smaller than my fist, while others might fill my palms. But for other kinds of knowledge, I rely on the newspaper. This is how I know that chickadees shiver to stay warm at night. In winter, they lose approximately 15% of their body weight each night to stay warm. And then they regain it again the next day. Their metabolisms are extraordinary. No one's aired a campaign to protect the chickadee yet. Although they face the same environmental threats we all do, accelerating climate change, the proliferation of plastic, and apathy, their population isn't measurably harmed yet. One type of documentation tells a story. It can tell me true things about how a chickadee lives through winter or what a politician said yesterday. The chickadee's winter weights, the biologist's lab notes, my own written memories live in time memorial. As though time is a map that can be pinned to the wall, documentation says, this bird weighed this much and was in this place at this time. But time immemorial is rhetorical recourse for living within a linear chronotope. In the stories of colonization and conquest, time is a linear line forward, a line marching west over a fixed map. In a linear chronotope, authenticity is documented by a mailing address, a lease agreement, a mortgage contract. The US government shows receipts for the state of Alaska, celebrates them as though the purchase of Alaska from Russia established ownership. A linear story speaks of land possession, as if the first Alaska Native peoples held the land, then the Russians held it, then the United States. And I wonder at this because my hands can hold a chickadee each, but even if I held them, they wouldn't be mine. Time immemorial disrupts linear movement. It sets aside the legalities of broken treaties, the arrivals of James Cook and Alexander Baranoff. Instead of relitigating history, time immemorial argues that the relationship between self, community, and the land needs to be rewritten. It encourages a recursive movement between the now and the practice of care for the land. Imagine time as a corkscrew, and imagine you are a child sitting on top of a long coiled slide. Each rotation carries you further, but still you pass through space you've occupied before. The chickadee and I encounter each other in the past, and we will see each other today and again tomorrow. There's an expectation that something established will continue into the future. When I hear time immemorial, it reminds me of my responsibilities to the place I inhabit, that it is my responsibility to be present, attentive. For me, to be Indigenous is to witness the chickadees and to act from the knowledge that I am in relationship with them. When I talk about the land I inhabit, I want to honor its deep time, that it runs differently from my own. The more than human world does not need my documentation, and still I write about it because I want to share it with you. Shannon, thank you.
Well, Annie, that was brilliant and always making me think you, always making me think deeper. Thank you. This is the last reader for the evening. It's Joe Wilkins. He came here to the Catchmack Bay Writers Conference and became a superstar. Every year he's on our list of, please invite him back, please invite him back. He was born and raised on the Big Dry of eastern Montana and now lives with his family in the foothills of the Coast Range of Oregon. He's the author of a novel, Fall Back Down When I Die, which was praised as remarkable and unforgettable in a starred review at Booklist. And he's written a memoir called The Mountain and the Fathers and 4 collections of poetry, one of which was the winner of the Oregon Book Award. Please welcome Joe.
Thank you so much, Erin. Thank you, Nickole and Erin. Thank you, everyone, for being here. This has been so lovely. I was looking at the issue of this journal and looking at the ways our pieces have been speaking to each other, both here in the reading and online. And I'm so pleased that my 2 poems are in the mercy section. I think growing up where I did and when I did, and the way I did, mercy is something I'm very interested in and something I want to offer and strive toward. So I'm going to read these 2 poems. The first one is called Dirt Song, and it's got an epigraph from Wikipedia, which I always tell my students, stay off the internet. Don't check your email. Don't be doing anything online except Wikipedia, because it's so important to be able to follow those little threads where they might go. So this is Dirt Song, and the epigraph is: the shortgrass prairie has suffered the greatest biological destruction of any major biome in North America. Dirt Song. This is blue grama, a short, spiky grass of the high plains, whose roots run twice as wide and 10 to 12 times as deep as the plant itself. Lean down to the slender stem and listen. In this next poem, I'm so, again, just really pleased and honored that Erin and Nickole saw this as something that honors the more than human world, because that's its intent. It's called Coggin Travelogue. Coggin is a tiny little town in eastern Montana, much like the tiny little town I grew up in, but maybe even smaller and farther out of the way. And we used to drive there to go see the Coggin Rodeo every summer. And so Coggin Travelogue, Mosby Road. You can get there on the Rim Road, but this early, it might be washed out. Another mile, we lose the music, nothing but preachers and static. Whip your empties out the window, that's a break, where the earth gives way like that. My grandmother calls it gully, a hard rain, a gully washer. I hooked this jacket from my old man's closet. He's too fat for it anyhow. I guarantee there are coal seams burning beneath us. How you know is in the winter the snow melts around the hot dirt mouth. Cinder cone ringed with clinker, scoria wash, the red of sunsets, that haze around the yucca flowers, that's moths. We've got a dozen miles of gravel before we hit highway, before this country even begins to unfold and roll out. Dark cake top ridge studded with dead pines. You see that girl, oh, sorry, second section, Highway 200. You see that girl behind the counter at the Mosby station? I like the sound of her voice, a wind with a little dust in it. All this cactus and sagebrush used to be an ocean, if you can believe. Ammonites are what they call those whorled snail fossils you find, mother of pearl ringing the rock shell. A deer jumps, but an antelope dives right through a fence. We caught my grandmother up to her tits in the river. That's why she has to live over at that place in Billings. Bars even on the goddamned windows. The slick of it beneath your thumb, that purple and cream mother of pearl. Look there, I can't tell where the sky ends and the land begins. Can you? Hell Creek Road. It's like the whole world tilts here and we're at the very top. How many of you had? I guess that leaves 3 for me. The old man has got these disability checks coming in, hardly ever lifts a finger anymore. We won't see a river the rest of the way, unless you count Hell Creek. Most don't. We go back through Mosby, let's stop and talk to her. I'd about listen to her say anything. How come the only place we ever go is rodeos? How'd a place like Coggin even end up way out where it is? And how'd this sky get so goddamn big and wide and blue? They say there were elk and grizzly bears, about 1 million buffalo. I mean this country before plows and fences and such. Before us.
Thank you so much, Joe. I think Nickole and I were wrangling with the idea of we were like, we'll open it up for questions, but and we will here, but just a little bit of time because it's a long time to be sitting at your computers. But I want to make sure that we thank the assistant editors. And you want to take away, do that, Nickole, or do you want me to? You do it. She's like, you do it. And I'm like, oh no, she just said you do it. I'd like to thank Jen Stever Ruckel, who was amazing and read all sorts of fiction that was completely off topic, but she was lovely about it. Athene Dilke and Michelle Seaman split the fiction, nonfiction, and poetry, which was a heap of stuff. So we just want to really acknowledge how much work they put in and how much we appreciated them.
I mean, it was only 930 submissions.
What?
So this was so incredible to hear all of these voices together, and Joe, you nailed it too when you see just the ways in which these pieces are echoing off of each other in so many ways. You know, looking at and paying attention to beings that we ordinarily dismiss, or having mercy for a creature that is either hated or, you know, from anything from the hornworm to the shark to the right, and it, setting aside our human concerns for these beings is just absolutely incredible. You know, I don't want to take long for questions, but if anyone has a burning question or a comment, you want to put it in the chat perhaps, please do that. Otherwise, Erin, what do you think? Think folks could just unmute and chat for a second? Peggy Shoemaker, it's so nice to see your face after all these years, by the way. My goodness, it's been a long time.
I think if anybody had a comment they wanted to make or a question, they could either use their little hand raiser thing, little emotic reaction, or I don't know, it doesn't seem like anyone's clamoring to do it, but we are open to it if you would like.
I just wish we were all around a table just to talk about this subject. You know, I just feel like the knowledge of science and the lyricism and the empathy that is gathered here is absolutely incredible and so inspiring. It really is. All right. Oh, Kai.
I just wanted to say, I said it in the chat, but I really feel, especially after hearing and feeling everybody's work, that I have found my people. And I just feel so honored to have shared this time with you all and to know that you're out there in the world writing what you are writing and seeing what you are seeing and paying attention the way that you are. It makes such a difference, and just keep doing it. I'm just so honored to have been with you all these past couple of hours. And so thank you so much for this opportunity.
Absolutely.
Well, in that case, we'll let you all go into the whatever part of the day it is where you are to listen and keep writing and listening. And I do know that if you would stop into the About Place journal, the next call is up and you might have something for that as well. They are looking for stories about the West that are not about the stereotypical West. They're looking for ways to reimagine that story. And I'm sure some of you have stories that you'd like to add.
Well, from Alaska to Mexico, we thank you.